Hi guys, in today's video I would like to talk to you about network protection and security on Synology using different devices. So I'm going to use the software I'm always talking about, Sophos, the Synology and my ISP router, because you're always hearing me about secure architecture, best practices, and here I just like to show you part of it. So the devices involved are my ISP router, which I'm going to use the firewall feature and the port forwarding feature, the Sophos UTM 9 device, where I'm going to use the advanced firewall, the port forwarding, and some other features that you can see here. Those features, most of them will be, I will talk about them in some other videos, because here it's just about network security, so more related to antivirus and IPS. And of course, I've got the firewall of my Synology and the antivirus, but we will not talk about this in this video. Now, for the Sophos setup. So the Sophos software is free for personal use and up to 50 IPs. Now for the hardware, I'm using an APU 2C4 system board with a 1 GHz quad-core Jaguar and 4 GB of RAM and 3 GB Ethernet ports, interfaces. And of course, I've got the enclosure, the adapter, and the necessary stuff for the wireless antenna, and the SSD of a 120 GB mSATA component. And so the total price of this secure architecture is around $200 or 180 euros for your European people. So you see, it's really not expensive, and you will be able to do a lot of things with it. In terms of performance, you cannot go below those values. Either the Sophos software will not get installed, or either the performance will be too low. Now this is really the minimum that you can have for a home use. If you would like to use this setup, there are two points that can be of a problem for you. First of all, there are some difficulties to install the Sophos software in this hardware. It's quite complicated. If someone is interested, I can give you a step-by-step the procedure to install, because it's really difficult if you don't know about this, and you will get crazy. And for the wireless setup, unfortunately, it only works up to the old version of the UTM, which is the 9.4, and now we are at 9.7. So this might not work. I've tried it on the 9.5 a couple of years ago, but it did not work anymore. So I just went back to the 9.4 version so I can have the wireless feature. Anyway, now for the architecture, what I'm having, I'm having 3 layers of defenses. I'm having my first firewall with my router, my second firewall with the advanced features of Sophos, and the third firewall with the NAS. So here we're going to talk about defense in depth. So different kind of security almost everywhere. Now for my ISP router, it's the only role is to block any kind of incoming traffic that I'm not specifically allowing. So that means that I'm only allowing the OpenVPN traffic that is handled by my Sophos device, the IMAPS traffic, the SMTPS traffic, this one is also only handled here, the DS Cloud traffic, and the HTTPS traffic for the web applications. So I'm using the web browser or the web application of Sophos, like DS Drive, for example, DS Video, and I'm always going to call a different hostname with the same port, which is the HTTPS port 443, and then the Sophos device, by looking at the host header, is going to transmit the flow to the specific service. So here we talked about different kind of services, and they're going to be handled differently in my Sophos device. So for example, for the IMAPS traffic and DS Cloud traffic, those ports, they cannot be proxied, or those services cannot be proxied or reverse proxied. they have to go directly from the internet to your NAS. So it's really a direct traffic. So I'm doing some simple port forwarding. Of course, the IPS will always work, because if someone is going to try to attack those specific ports, it's going to detect and to stop them. Now for the SMTPS, it's a little bit different. Although I'm using the mail server package, the SMTPS is only handled on the Sophos device. So it's a SMTPS proxy and a gateway, and it will never go outside the Sophos device. Okay, so no SMTPS traffic to the NAS. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's also going to scan for antivirus in the body of the message and apply some IPS rules. Now for the SMTP flows, there are two kinds of flows depending on which client you're using. If you're using the DSMail client on the phone, for example, it's going to communicate with your NAS in HTTPS. Then the NAS is going to communicate to the Sophos device on SMTPS, and the Sophos device is going to talk to my mail provider in SMTPS 2. Now, if I'm not using the DSMail client, I'm using the mail application of my Windows 10, of my macOS, or the embedded mail client in iOS, for example. Now it's going to talk directly to the SMTPS service of the Sophos device. It's going to authenticate the user, and it's going to relay the traffic to my mail provider. So there are different ways of working. Now, as I said, any kind of HTTPS traffic is being reverse proxied. Like for example, you have the let's say the video https://video.local on the port 443. It's going to be redirected on my NAS to the service, to the video station service, always in HTTPS. What is important here is that I have my Let's Encrypt certificate configured here, so I have the TLS termination, and this is extremely important because as I'm using the reverse proxy with the TLS termination, I am able to scan the traffic for viruses, for attacks with the IPS. For the reverse proxy, you can have some access control rules with, for example, to allow or block some IPs, to implement some access control with the authentication form before I can access the service, for example, and the web application firewall to block any kind of web-based related attacks. So this is very important. It is the TLS termination thanks to the reverse proxy, because of the reverse proxy. Now, for the ISP router firewall, so it's very easy. It's blocking any kind of traffic I am not specifically allowing. So I'm going to allow to be forwarded to the UTM, to the Sophos device, the OpenVPN port, the port that is used, when I would like to contact my host names with my application, so to the reverse proxy, the IMAPS, the SMTPS port, the IMAPS port, and the DS Cloud, the Cloud Station package port. So this is very easy. Now on the Synology, here on the source IP address, here this is the reverse proxy of Sophos. So it's going to, I need to have a rule that is going to allow my reverse proxy to communicate with those ports which represent my different Synology package ports. Then I have some direct traffic here from my internal network to some specific services. It is allowed here, but it is blocked on my Sophos device because I don't want to change too many rules in the Synology. Well, we also have the 6690 and the 903. As I said before, you have to doubly, allow all the traffic from the internet, because you cannot reverse proxy those kind of traffic. And the last rule is to block any other kind of incoming traffic. The Synology firewall is only an incoming firewall, it's not an outgoing firewall. So this rule is only going to affect any kind of incoming traffic. You're not obliged to do it, to make this rule. It's just that I like to have a specific deny rule so I know it's here, but normally it should have no effect. Now for the Sophos firewall, so my first rule is to to block any kind of attackers. If I see, for example, that someone is attacking me for days, and I'm fed up of having some alerts, for example, I'm afraid that he might get in because he's insisting, I'm going to block the attacker with a special rule. For the second rule, I'm going to only allow this traffic into the internet on all the ports only if I'm going to use the download station package. If I'm not using it, I can block this traffic. Why? Because if my NAS gets compromised and, for example, an attacker puts a reverse shell, the NAS is going to try to communicate over standard or non-standard port to the attacker, so the attacker can have a complete control on my device. So I'm only allowing this if I need to use the download station. Now you're going to tell me that how are you allowing the basic network services like HTTP and HTTPS because it needs to connect to Synology? Well, this will be in another video because I'm allowing this kind of traffic through a proxy and not through the opening of network ports. It's different because when you're using some network ports, you don't know what is inside those, what is the traffic going through those ports. But with the web filter, you can discover and control the URLs that is being used and the types of application that is doing the request. So this will be in other videos. Now, I have here the direct traffic for management. For example, as I said, it's blocked on the Sophos, but it's allowed on the NAS. And we have the cloud station and the mail traffic from the internet, from the VPN, and from the internal network, which is allowed to communicate with the NAS. For the other rules, so this is in a double, I made a mistake. Here we have a rule which is now deactivated because, as I said, the SMTPS traffic is completely 100% handled by Sophos and not by the NAS. If I need to deactivate my SMTPS proxy on Sophos because I have a problem, then I need to activate this rule. Now for this rule is not completely correct. I made a mistake. My NAS is doing some POP3 retrieval for my Yahoo email address that I'm not really using anymore, but it's doing some POP3 retrieval. So the NAS has to communicate with those Yahoo addresses with the POP3 service. Now, the mistake here is that I'm using I'm allowing the NAS to communicate with the OVH, my mail provider, on SMTP and SMTPS. And this is actually not true because my NAS is configured to communicate in SMTPS only with Sophos, and Sophos is doing all the work. So this rule is not really correct. And then I have my last rule, which is going to block any kind of other traffic, and I'm going to log this traffic. Now for the NAT, also I have my first rule is to block or to, to transfer attackers to a black hole address. If they're attacking me on my SMTPS service, on my WAN address, I'm going to redirect them to a black hole address and change the service, so they will never be able to access the port actually. Because the NAT has a precedence, I don't know how you say it, before any kind of other rules. Now I have those 4 rules. It's only to allow the 6690 service and the IMAP-S service from the internet and from the internal network. So now it's getting a little bit more complicated. The challenge I had is that for the 6690 and the IMAP-S port, I didn't want to have to change the address, for example, or that the traffic go through my public IP address while it only has to stay, inside my network. So what I did, okay, let's say that I have cloud.local, which resolves when you are on the internet to my public IP address. This public IP address is the external WAN address, okay? So I'm going to say, if it's coming from the internet to my IMAP-S service or my 6690 service to my WAN address, I'm going to redirect it to my NAS on the same services. Now, if I am inside my own network, I don't want this traffic. If I resolve cloud.local, it's going to resolve to the public IP address, and then it's going to go back in. It might either not work, or it's not really, it's not really nice. So what I did is to create a DNS entry in Sophos, which says that if I'm going to resolve the cloud.local address, it's going to resolve to my to my local network address, of my interface, of my LAN. Okay, so my inside local network is 192.168.2.x, so /24. If I'm going to resolve cloud.local, it's going to go to this address, and then if it sees that it's going to go to this address, it's going to resolve to my NAS and to the port 6690. So this is a bit more complicated, but it's better like this, so I know that everything is clean, is well configured. I've got the same problem with the reverse proxy, but this will be in another video. Now, for the Sophos country blocking, so you know that you can do some country blocking on the Synology. I'm not doing it there because I would like the security, the important security, to be handled by my Sophos device. So here I have a print screen of some of the countries, because there are a lot more that I cannot show here. And I'm blocking the traffic from absolutely any kind of country. So it can be outgoing traffic or incoming traffic. Now here I'm only talking about incoming traffic. All the traffic from any countries is blocked. If you would like to allow a country, you can allow the country here, and it will allow all the services coming from those countries that you are allowing. I didn't want that because I want to have a granular control for which services for which country. You can also do a mix of this, country restriction tab and with NAT rules and firewall rules, but I prefer to authorize all this through the country blocking exception tab. So here you go. The exceptions is for example, from specific countries for specific protocols. So here you have the direct traffic for the IMAP-S and the 6690 service going to the NAS. I'm going to allow them from France and Switzerland only. Now from the SMTPS and VPN, as I said, all of this is absolutely completely handled by the Sophos device. So it's configured for my WAN address for only the SMTPS service and the HTTP service. So this is really to be extremely granular. You're not obliged to do all this. It might be complicated, but at least I know exactly what is being allowed. Now for the ICMP handling, I'm not going to go all through those options. I just know that I'm allowing ICMP through gateway when I am inside my network, so it can get out. And there are also some other settings for the ping, and from traceroute, everything here is blocked, for security reason, so to make the reconnaissance harder for the attacker. For the advanced firewall, you have some connection tracking helpers for the FTP protocol. For example, you have some features for the protocol handling. I'm not understanding all of them. I'm just using the packet length validation. I'm going to block invalid packets, so for packets that do not, that are not for a session that is known, it's going to block the packets. And also having some protection against spoofing. So all of this is explained here. For the spoofing protection, you might not really use it anyway when you are in a home network, because it's a very small network. So it's not really it's not big of a use, but I'm using it because, I like to see if sometime something happens, I would like to be able to understand it. For the IPS, so the intrusion prevention system is going to recognize attacks by means of a signature-based IPS rule set that we're going to see after. The system is going to analyze the traffic and is going to automatically block the attacks before they can reach the network. And for some kind of traffic, it's good to have the TLS termination, because if the traffic is encrypted, you might not see what is going on. This is more for the web applications, but here I'm not going to talk about them. So I'm going to protect my DMZ where my NIC is, my VPN, and my wireless network. And I'm going to silently drop the packet. You can reject the packet, but if you reject the packet, then the attacker will have a notification, and then it can help him to, to pinpoint some other information about you. So just drop silently the packet. For the restart policy, so if maybe there is an update or if there is a problem, it's going to drop all packets. You can also bypass in case of problem, but me, I'm dropping all the packets. So here is the attack patterns that the Sophos device, the IPS system, is able to understand or to treat. It's everything that is operating system based, like Windows, Linux, and some other operating systems. Against servers, so HTTP server is good for us. For the mail servers, database servers, and some other kind of servers. So here you can read all of that. Now from the anti-DOS, so there are two kinds or even more, but here two main kinds of DOS attacks. Some that are related to bandwidth. So in case this happens, you can't do anything because this has to be done at the ISP level. But if someone is trying to make resource exhaustion attack, now this will be helpful. So with the resources exhaustion attack is going to send you a lot of SYN packets with a forged source IP address, and it's going to open a socket on your device, and it's going to use some resources. Now, if the Sophos device sees that, it's going to block. This is going to be, depending on what you're doing here. So it's for TCP or UDP or ICMP, but you don't see the two others because it's more down. So the Sophos device is going to check for a specific source if he's sending too many packets. If it's the case, it's going to check also the destination, and if for the destination that the source is trying to access, it goes over the threshold, it's going to block the traffic. Now this you can put source only or destination only or source and destination. This is, you can choose. For the values, I've left them by default. For the port scan, so the Sophos device is able to detect and block port scans if one IP address is going to scan too many ports in a time frame of 300 milliseconds. So it's going to to put a score for different kind of ports. So every port that is under 1024, if someone scans it, it's going to add 3 points. And if it's over 1024, it's going to add 1 point. And when it goes over 21 points for an IP address in 300 milliseconds, it's going to block the traffic, which is quite good, especially if you have a lot of different open ports. But this here is not my case. Now for the advanced tab of the IPS, what you can have, you have the activate file related patterns, which seems that if you have some network flows that are not going through an antivirus protection, you can enable this feature. It's going to consume more resources, but I'm not really sure to completely understand what it really does. It's not really well explained, at least for me, in the Sophos manual. And you also have the performance tuning. So for example, this option is here to limit false positives and to have better performance on your Sophos device. Why? Because if, for example, for the HTTP servers, you have activated HTTP related patterns attacks, and you have an HTTP server. If you put the HTTP server here in this box, it's going to apply those patterns only for this specific server. So that's why you're going to have less false positive, and you will have a greater performance. I think you also have for DNS and for mail services, but I'm not really sure. I don't remember what you have because it's below this page. Well, I think that's all what I wanted to show you. So this is how I handle security from a network and architecture perspective. But here it was only, to the network related to network firewalls. On other videos, it's going to be more against with web control, application control, and proxies, and I guess also the reverse proxy with the web application firewall. Well, I hope this video has been informative for you, and if you have any kind of questions, feel free to ask and I will try to answer them in the comment section. Bye bye.